The nebula Androconis shimmered in the void, like a sprawling ocean of iridescent gases, hues of violet, cobalt, and emerald swirling with an unsettling beauty. It was a place few dared to venture, a region infamous for its living vortices, enigmatic energy currents that moved as though alive, seeking prey. Even the most advanced alien civilizations steered clear of this treacherous expanse. But aboard the Peregrina, humanity's flagship exploration vessel, the mood was one of grim determination. They had a mission to complete, no matter the tunes. Danger. Captain Sarah Connell stood on the bridge, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. Her piercing green eyes scanned the nebula through the massive observation window, her expression resolute. She was a woman of commanding presence, her auburn hair tied back in a severe knot, every inch of her bearing radiating authority and confidence. Around her, the hum of the ship's systems and the low murmur of her crew created a steady rhythm, a counterpoint to the chaos lurking just beyond their hull. "This is it," Sarah said, her voice steady but tinged with an undercurrent of anticipation. "The edge of Androconis. Keep us on course and maintain long-range scans. If the vortices decide to wake up, I want to know before they're on. Top of us." At her side stood Chiron, a towering figure of wiry elegance. He was Erelind, a species known for their near telepathic perception and emotionless logic. His skin shimmered faintly, a pearlescent silver, and his elongated, angular face gave him an air of detachment. His voice, when he spoke, resonated like the chime of crystal bells, haunting and otherworldly. "Captain Connell," Chiron said, tilting his head in a gesture that could have been either curiosity or disdain. "Do you truly believe your species has the capacity to navigate such dangers? Androconis has claimed the ships of races far older and far more advanced than yours." Sarah shot him a sidelong glance, her lips curving into a faint smirk. "You'd be surprised what humans are capable of, Chiron. We may not have your fancy telepathy or the Kriegor's crystalline armor, but we have something none of you seem to understand." Chiron arched a silvery brow. "And what, pray tell, is that?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "The ability to figure it out as we go." Before Chiron could respond, a warning chime echoed through the bridge. The officer at the sensor station, a young man with sharp features and a constantly furrowed brow named Lieutenant Vargas, looked up from his console. "Captain, we're picking up a structure on long-range scans. It's massive, definitely artificial." Sarah's smirk disappeared, replaced by a look of keen interest. "Details, Lieutenant." Vargas's fingers flew across his console, pulling up a holographic projection of the object. It flickered into view in the center of the bridge, a rotating image of a vast ancient station. Its design was alien and unsettling, with spires that curled like the tendrils of a sea creature and surfaces that seemed to pulse faintly as though alive. It was partially encased in what looked like crystalline growths, glimmering with an unnatural light. "It's orbiting a dying star," Vargas continued. "Looks like it's been abandoned for centuries, maybe millennia. The architecture matches no known species, but there are traces of energy signatures consistent with Mirac technology." At the mention of the Mirac, a hush fell over the bridge. The Mirac were a near-mythical race, said to have vanished, long before most modern species had even evolved. Their technology was the stuff of legend and nightmares. Sarah's jaw tightened. "A Mirac station out here? That can't be a coincidence. Helm, alter course to intercept. I want us in range." For a detailed scan, Chiron's eyes narrowed, his expression unreadable. "Captain, if this is truly a relic of the Mirac, it would be unwise to approach. Their fate serves as a warning to all who would tamper with powers beyond their comprehension." "Noted," Sarah replied briskly, her tone making it clear she would not be swayed. "But if there's even a chance that station holds answers, or technology that could help humanity, we have to investigate." The Peregrina moved steadily closer to the station, its sleek hull cutting through the swirling gases of the nebula. Outside, the living vortices began to stir, their luminous forms gliding through the mists like predatory phantoms. The tension on the bridge was palpable, every crew member acutely aware of the danger. As the station loomed larger in the viewport, its eerie details became clearer. The crystalline growths were not static. They pulsed with a rhythmic glow as though alive. Strange symbols etched into the metal glimmered faintly, their meaning long lost to time. "Bring us into orbit," Sarah ordered. "Prepare an away team. I want to see this up close." Chiron stepped forward, his expression stern. "I insist on accompanying you. If this truly is Mirac technology, your people are woefully unprepared to understand, let alone handle it." Sarah's eyes met his, unflinching. "Fine, but if you try anything, I'll have you locked in the brig faster than you can say inefficient humans." Chiron inclined his head, the faintest hint of a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Understood, Captain." The away team assembled in the hangar bay, clad in reinforced exosuits designed for hazardous environments. Alongside Sarah and Chiron were Vargas and two other crew members, their expressions a mix of excitement and apprehension. The shuttle ride to the station was tense, the silence broken only by the hum of the engines and the occasional beep of sensors. As they docked with the station, the atmosphere inside was oppressive. The air was thick with a faint metallic scent, and the walls seemed to ripple faintly under the glow of their suit lights. The interior was a labyrinth of twisting corridors and cavernous chambers, the architecture both awe-inspiring and deeply unsettling. "Captain," Vargas said, his voice hushed, "this place, it feels alive." Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning their surroundings. "Stay alert. We don't know what we're dealing with." In the heart of the station, they found what appeared to be a control room. A massive console dominated the space, its surface covered in alien symbols and glowing panels. Suspended above it was a crystalline sphere pulsing with an inner light that seemed almost sentient. Chiron approached the console cautiously, his long fingers hovering over the symbols. "This is beyond anything I've ever seen," he murmured. The Mirac were not merely builders, they were manipulators of reality itself. Before Sarah could respond, the crystalline sphere flared brightly and the entire room came alive. The walls shifted, the symbols glowing with a sudden intensity. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, and an alien voice echoed through the chamber, speaking in a language none of them recognized. "What's happening?" Vargas shouted, his voice tinged with panic. Chiron's eyes widened, a rare expression of fear crossing his face. "The station is waking up." The shuttle approached the massive station, its hull gliding through the swirling gases of the nebula Andraconis. The structure loomed larger with every passing moment, a sprawling, alien design that seemed more like a relic of a forgotten nightmare than an artifact of advanced engineering. The crystalline growths covering its surface pulsed rhythmically, casting an eerie glow onto the shuttle as it docked. Inside, the airlock hissed open, revealing a corridor shrouded in dim, flickering light. The walls seemed alive, covered in a material that shifted and pulsed faintly, as if breathing. The away team stepped cautiously into the alien structure, their boots clinking against the metallic floor. Captain Sarah Cannell led the group, her face a mask of steely determination, though her sharp green eyes betrayed the spark of curiosity that burned within her. "This place feels wrong," muttered Vargas, gripping his rifle tightly. The young engineer's voice echoed faintly down the corridor, swallowed by the oppressive silence of the station. "Stay focused," Sarah said, her voice firm. "We're here to investigate, not panic. Keep your eyes open for anything that might explain what this station is and why it's here." Chiron, walking a few steps behind, studied the shifting walls with a mixture of fascination and unease. His silvery skin seemed to reflect the faint light, making him appear almost ghost-like in the dimness. "This architecture, it's unlike anything I've encountered. If this truly is Mirac in origin, their mastery of biotechnology far exceeded what the legends suggest." The corridor opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling arching high above them and illuminated by faint glowing veins that ran like rivers of light along the walls. In the center stood a massive console, its surface covered in alien symbols that glimmered faintly. Suspended above it, a crystalline sphere rotated slowly, emanating a soft hum that vibrated through the floor and into their bones. Sarah approached, the console cautiously, her gloved hand reaching out to brush against one of the symbols. The surface was cold to the touch, yet it pulsed with an energy that seemed to resonate with her heartbeat. "This must be the control center," she murmured. "If we can figure out how to interface with it, we might be able to access the station's data." Chiron stepped forward, his elongated fingers hovering over the console. "The Mirac did not design their technology for ease of use," he said, his voice carrying an edge of warning. "If you activate the wrong system, the consequences could be catastrophic." "We're not leaving empty-handed," Sarah replied, her tone brooking no argument. "Vargas, start scanning the console. Let's see if we can make sense of this." Vargas knelt beside the console, pulling a handheld scanner from his pack. The device emitted a faint hum as it passed over the alien symbols, projecting data onto a small holographic screen. "I'm picking up some kind of energy signature," he said, frowning. "It's unstable, like the system hasn't been used in centuries and is barely holding together." As Vargas worked, the crystalline sphere above them began to glow, brighter, its hum deepening into a resonant thrum. The team exchanged uneasy glances, the air growing heavy with tension. "Captain," Vargas said, his voice tinged with alarm, "something's happening. The station, it's reacting to us." Suddenly the walls of the chamber shifted, the glowing veins flaring with light. The symbols on the console began to rearrange themselves, forming patterns that seemed almost deliberate. The crystalline sphere pulsed, and a deep, resonant voice echoed through the chamber, speaking in a language none of them recognized. Chiron's eyes widened, a rare expression of genuine fear crossing his face. "This is not a simple artifact," he said, his voice trembling. "It's alive. The station is alive." The team stepped back as the console erupted in light, projecting holographic images into the air. The images showed scenes of the Mirac, their towering, elegant forms bathed in golden light, manipulating vast energy fields. But the images soon shifted, showing chaos, stars collapsing, entire fleets consumed by swirling voids of darkness. "What is this?" Sarah demanded, her voice sharp. "What are we seeing?" Chiron's gaze was fixed on the images, his silvery skin shimmering faintly as he processed what was unfolding. "It's a warning," he said, his tone grim. "The Mirac weren't just builders. They were tampering with the fabric of reality itself. This station, it wasn't meant to preserve their knowledge. It was meant to contain it." Before Sarah could respond, the floor beneath them trembled and the chamber was bathed in a blinding light. The crystalline sphere began to spin rapidly, emitting a high-pitched whine that set their teeth on edge. The walls pulsed violently, and the air grew thick with an electrical charge. "We need to leave, now!" Vargas shouted, scrambling to his feet. Sarah hesitated, her eyes darting between the console and the exit. "Not yet. If this station has answers, we can't just abandon them. Chiron, can you shut it down?" Chiron shook his head, his expression grim. "The systems are far beyond my comprehension. If we interfere, we could trigger something far worse than what we've seen." As the crystalline sphere reached a fever pitch, a beam of light shot from its core, striking the console and illuminating a series of symbols that began to pulse in sequence. The alien voice returned, louder and more insistent, its tone almost accusatory. "Captain!" Vargas yelled, his scanner flashing red. "The energy levels are spiking. If we don't get out of here, this entire place could blow." Sarah clenched, her fists torn between the need to survive and the drive to uncover the station's secrets. Finally, she barked a command. "Everyone, fall back to the shuttle. Move!" The team retreated, their footsteps echoing through the twisting corridors, as the station continued to shake and pulse around them. Behind them, the chamber erupted in a cascade of light and sound, the alien voice growing fainter as they fled. As they reached the airlock, Chiron cast one last glance over his shoulder, his expression a mix of awe and dread. "Whatever the Mirac created here," he murmured, "it was never meant to be found." Sarah didn't reply, her focus fixed on the task of getting her crew to safety. But in the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that the station wasn't finished with them yet. The Peregrina had barely escaped the chaotic inferno of the Mirac station when the reality of what they had uncovered began to settle over the crew. The data they had managed to extract was fragmented, riddled with alien symbols and indecipherable patterns. Yet Sarah Connell knew it held immense significance. As the ship cruised through the nebula Andraconis, the captain gathered her officers in the war room, a sterile space dominated by a central holographic display. "We've recovered something remarkable," Sarah began, her voice steady, though her exhaustion was evident in the subtle slump of her shoulders. Whatever the Mirac were working on, it wasn't just technology. It was a force, something that transcends our understanding of space and time. Lieutenant Vargas, seated at the table, rubbed his temples. "Captain, we've been lucky so far, but we're not prepared for this. That station almost killed us. What if this thing we've recovered is more dangerous than we realize?" Sarah's green eyes swept across the room, lingering on each of her officers before she spoke. "It might be dangerous, but it's also an opportunity. If we can understand it, maybe even harness it, humanity might finally have a way to level the playing." Fielding the cenáculo das espécies. From the corner of the room, Chiron watched in silence, his silvery skin faintly glowing under the dim lights. His expression was unreadable, but his narrowed eyes betrayed a growing tension. "Captain," Chiron interjected, his melodic voice carrying a sharp edge, "you are playing with forces beyond your comprehension. The Mirac were obliterated by their hubris. If you think humanity can succeed where they failed, you are deluding yourself." Sarah turned to face him, her expression hardening. "You've made your opinion clear, Chiron, but this isn't just about humanity. If the wrong species gets their hands on this knowledge, the consequences could be catastrophic." Chiron's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. The meeting adjourned and the crew dispersed, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. Yet unbeknownst to her, Chiron's silence was not acceptance, it was calculation. That night, as the Peregrina drifted through the nebula, Chiron moved through the dimly lit corridors with purpose. His movements were silent, his presence barely registering to the ship's automated systems. Reaching the restricted data vault, he placed a slender hand on the console, his fingers emitting a faint glow as he interfaced with the ship's systems. Within seconds, the encrypted files extracted from the Mirac station began transferring to a small device concealed within his robes. "Chiron," a voice cut through the silence, sharp and commanding. Chiron froze, his head snapping toward the source. Sarah stood in the doorway, her sidearm drawn but lowered. Her eyes burned with fury and betrayal. "What are you doing?" Chiron straightened, his expression calm, though his eyes betrayed a hint of regret. "Captain Connell, you must understand, this knowledge cannot remain in human hands. The coalition of advanced species has decreed it. If humanity wields this power, it will only lead to chaos." "You've been working against us this whole time," Sarah said, her voice low and seething. "Why? You've seen what we're capable of. We're not the reckless fools you think we are." Chiron took a step toward her, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Your resourcefulness is impressive, but it is precisely your unpredictability that makes you dangerous. The Coalition sent me here to ensure that your kind does not disrupt the fragile balance of power. By sabotaging us, by stealing from us?" Sarah's grip on her sidearm tightened. "I should throw you in the brig." Chiron sighed, a sound like the faint chime of wind against glass. "If you do, the Coalition will send others, far less merciful than me. Surrender the data willingly, Captain, and I will ensure your people are not harmed." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them, the faint hum of the ship the only sound. Then Sarah shook her head, a grim smile tugging at her lips. "You don't know humans very well, if you think we'll just roll over." Chiron's gaze hardened. "Then you leave me no choice." Before Sarah could react, Chiron's hand moved in a blur, striking a panel on the wall. The lights flickered as the ship's systems momentarily faltered, and Chiron darted past her, moving with an agility that belied his slender frame. "Security! Lock down the vault and apprehend Chiron!" Sarah barked into her communicator, already sprinting after him. Chiron moved swiftly through the ship, his knowledge of its layout allowing him to evade the crew for a time. But the humans were relentless, their determination unyielding. Cornered in the engine room, Chiron found himself surrounded, Sarah standing at the forefront with her sidearm aimed squarely at him. "End this, Chiron," Sarah commanded, her voice cold. "You can't win." Chiron looked at her, his expression weary but resolute. "I do not need to win, Captain. I only need to delay you." Before Sarah could respond, Chiron pressed a hidden device on his wrist, and a burst of energy erupted from it, temporarily disabling the humans' weapons and systems. In the chaos, Chiron activated the ship's long-range transmitter, sending the Mirac data out into the void. As the systems rebooted, Sarah tackled Chiron to the ground, her expression a mix of fury and desperation. "What did you do?" Chiron looked up at her, his voice calm despite his defeat. "I have ensured that the knowledge will reach those who can contain it." "You've betrayed us," Sarah hissed, her voice trembling with anger. "I have saved you," Chiron replied, his eyes meeting hers, "though you may never see it that way." The security team dragged Chiron away, but Sarah's mind raced. If Chiron had sent the data to the Coalition, the Peregrina would not be alone for long. Somewhere in the depths of the nebula, hostile forces were undoubtedly on their way. The Peregrina floated in uneasy silence, its engines humming faintly as the crew processed the magnitude of Chiron's betrayal. The encrypted data stolen from the Mirac station had been sent into the void, a signal now undoubtedly intercepted by the coalition of advanced species. Captain Sarah Connell stood on the bridge, her hands gripping the edge of the console as her piercing green eyes stared out at the swirling expanse of the nebula Androconis. The colorful, glowing mists outside seemed to press against the ship, enclosing them in an ominous cocoon. "Status report," Sarah said, her voice sharp and steady, though a flicker of exhaustion lined her features. Lieutenant Vargas looked up from his station, his face pale and tense. "Captain, long-range scanners have picked up multiple vessels heading in our direction. Based on their signatures, they're Krigor ships." A ripple of dread passed through the crew. The Krigor were infamous throughout the galaxy, massive reptilian creatures encased in crystalline armor that refracted light in dazzling, disorienting patterns. Their fleets were brutal and efficient, and their reputation as enforcers of the Coalition left no room for mercy. "How long until they reach us?" Sarah asked, her tone as controlled as the tightening of her jaw. "2 hours at most," Vargas replied. "They're faster than us, Captain. There's no way we can outrun them." Sarah's mind raced. The Krigor weren't coming to negotiate. They were coming to take what the humans had uncovered, and they wouldn't hesitate to destroy the Peregrina in the process. She straightened, her expression hardening with determination. "Prep the crew for combat," she said. "If they think we'll hand over this ship without a fight, they're in for a surprise." The bridge buzzed with activity as the crew sprang into action, but Sarah couldn't ignore the weight of their odds. The Peregrina was an exploration vessel, not a warship. Their shields and weapons were rudimentary compared to what the Krigor would bring to bear. Still, humanity had always thrived under impossible circumstances. As the crew prepared, Sarah descended to the brig where Chiron was being held. The Erelin sat in his cell, his silvery skin shimmering faintly under the harsh lighting. He looked up as she approached, his expression calm but unreadable. "They're coming for us," Sarah said, her voice low and firm. "Krigor ships, armed to the teeth. Your message worked, Chiron. Congratulations." Chiron tilted his head, his luminous eyes studying her. "You brought this upon yourself, Captain. I gave you a choice. You refused to see reason. And now my crew is going to pay for your sabotage," Sarah snapped, her green eyes flashing with fury. "I hope whatever noble cause you think you're serving is worth it." Chiron's gaze softened, though his voice remained steady. "You're stronger than you think, Sarah. Humans always are. It's both your greatest strength and your greatest flaw." Sarah took a step closer, her fists clenched at her sides. "If we survive this, I'm going to make sure every species in the Coalition knows exactly what you did here." Chiron offered a faint smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "Survive first, Captain, then we'll discuss morality." Before Sarah could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Captain, this is Vargas. The Krigor ships have entered short-range sensors. They're hailing us." Sarah shot one last glare at Chiron before turning on her heel and storming out of the brig, her boots echoing sharply in the corridor. Back on the bridge, the tension was palpable. The Krigor fleet had arrived, Three massive ships, their crystalline hulls gleaming like jagged shards of a dying sun. The lead ship's communication channel opened, and a guttural, distorted voice filled the air. "Human vessel, this is Commander Jarok of the Krigor fleet. Surrender the data you have stolen, and your deaths will be swift." Sarah stepped forward, her jaw set and her eyes cold. "Commander Jarok, this is Captain Sarah Connell of the Peregrina. We don't have the data anymore. It was transmitted off the ship." The Krigor commander's laugh was low and menacing, like the grinding of stones. "Do not insult my intelligence, human. If you have sent the data, you still carry the knowledge. Surrender your vessel or be annihilated." Sarah's gaze flicked to the holographic display showing the Krigor ship surrounding them. She could see the energy signatures of their weapons powering up. They weren't bluffing. "Commander Jarok," she said, her voice steady despite the storm, brewing inside her. "If you fire on this ship, you risk destroying the knowledge you seek. Perhaps you should reconsider your approach." There was a long silence before the Krigor responded. "You speak boldly for a species so fragile. Very well. I will give you one chance to prove your worth. Surrender your ship and your lives will be spared." The transmission ended abruptly, and Vargas turned to Sarah, his face pale. "What do we do, Captain?" Sarah's mind raced. The Krigor were too powerful to fight head-on, and surrendering would mean handing over the secrets of the Mirak and the potential destruction of humanity. She glanced at the nebula outside, the swirling gases alive with energy and chaos. An idea began to form, risky and desperate, but it was all they had. "We're not surrendering," Sarah said, her voice firm. "Helm, take us deeper into the nebula. Push the engines as far as they'll go." The crew hesitated, knowing the dangers of the living vortices that haunted the heart of Androconis. But they trusted their captain, and one by one they nodded and began executing her orders. The Peregrina surged forward, plunging into the heart of the nebula. Behind them, the Krigor fleet followed, their ships cutting through the swirling mists like predators on the hunt. The living vortices began to stir, their glowing forms coalescing in the distance. The Peregrina danced through the chaos, its crew working in unison as Sarah directed them with precision. As the vortices grew more erratic, Sarah issued her final command. "Divert all remaining power to the shields. We're going to bait the vortices into the Krigor ships." The crew obeyed, their hands flying over consoles as the ship's systems groaned under the strain. The first vortex lashed out, a tendril of energy slicing through the void and striking one of the Krigor ships. The crystalline hull shattered, and the ship erupted in a burst of light and debris. The remaining Krigor ships pressed forward, undeterred, but the vortices were awake now, their movements wild and hungry. The Peregrina wove through the chaos, its shields barely holding as tendrils of energy lashed at its hull. Behind them, another Krigor ship was consumed, its destruction lighting up the nebula in a spectacular display. Only the lead Krigor ship remained, and it was closing the distance fast. Sarah gripped the console, her voice cutting through the chaos. "One more push. We have to get them into the heart of the vortex field." The Peregrina banked hard, engines screaming as it skimmed the edge of a massive vortex. The Krigor ship followed, but the vortex suddenly surged, its glowing tendrils wrapping around the crystalline hull. The Krigor ship struggled, its weapons firing wildly, but it was no match for the overwhelming force. With a final deafening crack, the ship imploded, its shards scattering into the nebula. The Peregrina limped out of the vortex field, its crew battered but alive. Sarah collapsed into her chair, her breath ragged but steady. They had survived, but she knew the fight was far from over. The Peregrina drifted through the chaotic expanse of the Androconis nebula, its engines sputtering as the ship's system struggled to recover from the intense escape. The victory against the Krigor fleet had been hard fought, but the cost was etched into every strained face on the bridge. Fires still smoldered in parts of the ship, and the crew worked tirelessly to patch leaks, restore power, and stabilize the wounded vessel. Yet amidst the destruction, a fragile sense of hope lingered. They had survived. Captain Sarah Connell stood at the center of the bridge, her uniform singed, her auburn hair disheveled. Her green eyes were sharp, scanning the holographic displays. that flickered with incomplete data. She turned to Vargas, who was nursing a minor burn on his arm but remained steadfast at his station. "Status report," Sarah demanded, her voice steady despite the exhaustion creeping into it. Vargas shook. His head. "Engines are at 40%, Captain. Shields are offline, weapons are non-functional, and the hull integrity is, let's say, fragile at best. If another fleet shows up, we won't be able to hold them off." Sarah exhaled deeply, her fingers gripping the edge of her console. "And the nebula? Are we clear of the vortices?" "For now," Vargas replied, his fingers flying over his console. "But there's no guarantee they won't shift back toward us. This region is unpredictable at best." Sarah nodded, her mind racing. They had bought themselves time, but they were far from safe. And then there was the matter of Chiron. His betrayal still burned in her mind, and despite his capture, she knew that the consequences of his actions were far from over. The coalition would not stop until they had what they believed was rightfully theirs. "Patch me through to the brig," Sarah ordered. Vargas complied, and moments later the holographic display flickered to life, showing Chiron sitting in his cell. The Erelind was as calm as ever, his silvery skin glowing faintly in the dim light. He looked up, his luminous eyes meeting Sarah's. Through the screen. "Captain Connell," Chiron said, his voice smooth, almost serene, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" Sarah leaned closer to the display, her expression hardened. "Don't play coy with me. You knew this would happen. The Krigor are gone, but we're barely holding this ship together. If another coalition fleet shows up, we're finished. Tell me, what exactly did you hope to accomplish by sending that signal?" Chiron tilted his head slightly, a faint smile, tugging at the corners of his lips. "I hope to prevent catastrophe, Captain. Humanity was never meant to possess the secrets of the Mirac. You are reckless, driven by ambition and desperation. My duty was to ensure those secrets didn't fall into hands that would misuse them." "And what about the hands of the coalition?" Sarah countered, her voice rising. "You think they're better. You think they won't use the Mirac technology to consolidate their power and crush anyone who challenges them?" Chiron's gaze didn't falter, perhaps, but they understand the magnitude of what they're dealing with. Humanity does not. Sarah's fists clenched, but she forced herself to remain composed. "You still don't get it, do you? What makes us dangerous isn't our ambition. It's that we never stop trying. We don't give up, even when the odds are stacked against us." Chiron remained silent for a moment, his expression contemplative. "Perhaps that is your greatest strength, and your greatest flaw." Before Sarah could respond, an alarm blared through the bridge. Vargas turned to her, his face pale. "Captain, we've got an incoming signal. It's not coalition. It's something else. I can't identify the source." Sarah's stomach tightened. "Put it on screen." The display flickered, and an image appeared, an alien being unlike anything they had seen before. It was massive, its translucent, shimmering form shifting and flowing, as though it were made of liquid light. Its features were indistinct, ever-changing, and its voice, when it spoke, resonated directly in their minds. "Humans," the being said, its tone neither hostile nor welcoming, but deeply ancient and profound. "You have awakened that which should have remained dormant." The crew froze, every pair of eyes locked on the screen. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady despite the chill that ran down her spine. "Who are you?" "I am a remnant of the Mirac," the being replied. "A fragment of their knowledge, encoded within the station you violated. I am neither alive nor dead, but a memory given form." Sarah exchanged a glance with Vargas before turning back to the being. "We didn't mean to violate anything. We were trying to understand." "Understanding is a dangerous endeavor," the Mirac remnant interrupted. "The knowledge you seek has destroyed countless civilizations. The Krigor, the Coalition, even your own species. They are all unworthy of it. And yet you persist." Sarah straightened, her jaw tightening. "Because we have to. Survival requires risk, and if we don't take risks, we'll never grow, never thrive." The Mirac remnant seemed to hesitate, its form flickering slightly. "Your defiance is unusual. The Mirac themselves were undone by their inability to contain their ambition. Perhaps humanity will follow the same path, or perhaps you will prove different. Sarah stepped closer to the display. What do you want from us? If this knowledge is so dangerous, why not destroy it outright? Because destruction is not always the answer, the being replied. The knowledge cannot be unmade, only passed on, or hidden. You are at a crossroads, human. I offer you a choice. The bridge was silent as the being's form shifted, becoming brighter, its voice deepening. You may choose to carry the knowledge, to bear the weight of what it will bring, or you may choose to surrender it, to seal it away forever. But no, neither path is without consequence. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she considered the being's words. The weight of the decision was immense, and every fiber of her being screamed with the enormity of the responsibility. The crew looked to her, their faces a mix of fear and hope. She squared her shoulders, her voice steady. Then we'll make our choice. But whatever happens next, we'll face it together. The Mirak remnant's form pulsed, its light enveloping the bridge as it prepared to deliver humanity's next trial.